Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. At first glance, the first book about Harry Potter may seem the simplest, but if you look closer, it's literally filled with tiny details and subtle hints that foreshadow the future and reveal the characters. Many of these details are easy to miss on a first read, so let's take a closer look. Enjoy watching. Number 1. He flew to the school roof. Long before Harry ever set foot in Hogwarts, he had already encountered signs of magic. One of the most memorable moments happened when Dudley and his gang were chasing him across the schoolyard. In panic, Harry somehow transported himself to the roof of the building, shocking not only himself but everyone around him. This episode can be seen as a hint at his future flying skills. A bit of a stretch, perhaps, but still. More than once, Harry would find salvation in the air, whether in Quidditch or aerial battles. Number 2. The appearance of Mrs. Figg. The zoo trip for Dudley's birthday is well known. It's the first time Harry's magic appeared in front of witnesses, when the glass of the boa constrictor's tank suddenly vanished, but there's an important detail in the book that the film left out. Usually, Harry wasn't taken on such outings at all, but was left with Mrs. Figg. At first glance, it's just a small detail, highlighting the Dursleys' dislike for him, but in fact it's an early introduction of a character who would later play a key role. Mrs. Figg turned out not to be just a cranky neighbour, but a squib connected to the wizarding world and a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Number 3. His habit of spiders. At the very start of the book, Harry wakes up in his cupboard and casually brushes a spider off his sock. It seems like a minor detail, merely showing the conditions he lived in, but later, in the second book, it plays a part. When Harry and Ron met Aragog, Harry reacted to the monstrous spider far more calmly than one might expect. After all, he had been used to spiders since childhood. Ron, on the other hand, frightened ever since his brothers once turned his toy into a spider, felt only terror. Number 4. He was given a sock. Before his 11th birthday, Harry remembers past celebrations. Unlike spoiled Dudley, he got pitiful scraps, a coat hanger, or Uncle Vernon's old socks. At first, it's simply a contrast with Dudley's life, but the detail is symbolic. The mention of an old sock appears just moments before Hagrid frees Harry from his slavery under the Dursleys, and a year later the sock takes on a whole new meaning, becoming the symbol of freedom for Dobby, the house elf. Number 5. Professor Quirrell saved Harry. One easily forgotten moment. When Harry and Ron accidentally wandered into the forbidden corridor, Filch caught them and was about to drag them to the dungeons. At that moment, Professor Quirrell unexpectedly saved them. At first glance, a coincidence. But knowing the book's ending, it's clear Quirrell wasn't there by chance. He was checking the area looking for a path to the Philosopher's Stone. A small but brilliant clue from the author. The very man who saved Harry was already preparing betrayal. Number 6. The first meeting with Draco Malfoy. In Madame Malkin's shop, Draco Malfoy strikes up a conversation with Harry without knowing who he is. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. His words are casual, but they reveal the world Harry is about to enter. Bloodlines matter, status matters. Draco assumes Harry, pale and quiet, must share his views. The arrogance is not just personal pride. It is the Malfoy family's ideology, passed from Lucius to his son. This first meeting sets the tone for their rivalry. When Draco later offers Harry friendship in the Slytherin common room, the echo of Madame Malkin's shop hangs over the choice. Harry refuses, remembering Ron Weasley standing awkwardly in his patched robes. It is a moment of definition. He chooses loyalty and kindness over privilege. What looked like a simple scene of boasting becomes the opening move in a conflict that will stretch through 7 books, the fight between inherited power and chosen values. Number 7. The symbolism of the scar. When Harry first feels his scar burn, it is during the opening feast at Hogwarts. He looks up at Professor Quirrell and the pain is sudden, sharp, unforgettable. Rowling writes, the pain had shot across the scar on his forehead. At the time, the moment passes quickly, hidden beneath the noise of the sorting hat and the excitement of school. But the scar is not just a wound. It reacts, it warns, it connects Harry to something darker. The boy who has just entered the magical world already carries inside him a thread that ties him to Voldemort. The scar's role only grows clearer in later books, but its foundation is here. It does not simply mark survival, it becomes an alarm, a key, a bridge between Harry and the Dark Lord. Every throb of pain is Voldemort's shadow brushing against him, even when the villain is thought to be gone. In this first subtle moment with Quirrell, the scar announces what Harry cannot yet know. His enemy is closer than anyone suspects, and their fates are bound together. Number 8, owls as harbingers of change. The letters from Hogwarts arrive not with a single owl, but with an army of them. At first, one envelope slips through the door, only for Uncle Vernon to snatch it away. Then more come. Soon the entire house is besieged. Rowling writes, on Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them cheerfully, as he spread marmalade on his newspapers, and then something came whizzing down the chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of the head. What begins as comedy quickly turns into symbolism. The owls refuse to be ignored. The letters will reach Harry no matter how many locks Vernon bolts or how many miles he drives to escape. In the wizarding world, owls are not only messengers, but carriers of fate. They break through the suffocating silence of Privet Drive, where the Dursleys have built their fortress of denial. The sight of dozens of birds circling the house is more than spectacle, it is inevitability. Harry's life is about to change, and nature itself conspires to make it happen. The Dursleys cannot silence destiny. The owls, with their persistence, show that magic will not stay hidden. The scene also underlines the contrast between Harry's two worlds. The Dursleys cling to their neat routine, their grey clothes, their desperate normality. The owls shatter it. They bring noise, feathers, letters, chaos. They are the messengers of a truth that cannot be contained by walls or by fear. For Harry, their arrival is not just a summons to Hogwarts. It is the first sign that he belongs to a different world, one that will always find him, no matter how hard others try to keep him away. Number 9, Gryffindor versus Slytherin match. The first Quidditch match Harry plays is Gryffindor against Slytherin. On the surface, it is a sporting event, full of speed, danger, and excitement. But the game is described in a way that feels larger than life, as if the entire school is watching two worldviews collide. Gryffindor represents courage and loyalty. Slytherin stands for cunning and ambition. When Harry takes his place as Seeker, he is not just playing a game. He is stepping into the symbolic fight that will define his entire journey. Rowling makes this clear through the tension of the match. Marcus Flint, the Slytherin captain, plays ruthlessly, while the Slytherin beaters try to unseat Harry by any means necessary. At one point, Harry's broom is cursed, and he clings to it for his life as it jerks and bucks beneath him. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off. The sabotage is later revealed to be connected to Professor Quirrell under the influence of Voldemort. The scene begins as schoolyard rivalry but suddenly becomes deadly. The duel between Gryffindor and Slytherin is no longer just a metaphor. Dark magic has entered the game. This match also shows the different kinds of bravery and fear. Hermione, who has no interest in Quidditch, becomes the true hero in the stands when she sets fire to Snape's robes, breaking Quirrell's curse. Harry, despite being new to the sport, pushes through danger to capture the golden snitch in his mouth. What should have been only points on a scoreboard becomes a lesson. In this world, courage will be tested, and the cost of victory is real. Later in the series, the pattern repeats. Gryffindor and Slytherin do not just battle on the field, they clash in the Chamber of Secrets, at the Department of Mysteries, and finally at the Battle of Hogwarts. The Quidditch match in the first book is the opening shot of that war. It teaches Harry and the reader that every choice, every side taken carries weight. What begins with a snitch in the sky will end with the fate of two houses and two philosophies colliding on the battlefield. Number 10. The Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised is first introduced when Harry sneaks into an unused classroom and finds it standing alone, covered in dust. When he looks inside, he does not see just himself, but himself surrounded by his parents. Rowling writes, "He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. For Harry, who has grown up unloved and alone, this is the most intoxicating vision imaginable. Yet the mirror does not give him his parents. It only shows him what he longs for most, trapping him in a dream that can never become real." Dumbledore later explains its danger with a simple warning. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge nor truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen. The words are not a casual lesson, they are the first real warning to Harry that longing itself can be dangerous. Magic is not always the trap. The true trap lies in the human heart. The motif returns again and again in Harry's story. In Goblet of Fire, the boy longs for his parents so much that he is nearly undone by the shade of his mother and father in the graveyard. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore himself falls victim to the same weakness, his obsession with the Resurrection Stone leading him toward his own death. And in Deathly Hallows, Harry confronts the temptation of the Hallows, relics that promise to bring back what is lost. Each of these moments is an echo of the mirror's warning. The Erised scene, then, is more than touching. It plants a truth at the core of the series. Desire can be blinding. Harry's survival depends on learning to let go, to move beyond the ache that the mirror first revealed. When he finally walks into the Forbidden Forest in the last book, ready to die without demanding anything in return, he proves he has learned the lesson. The boy who once sat before the mirror in longing has grown into the man who can turn away from it. Number 11. Dumbledore's Scar of the London Underground. On his first ride to Hogwarts, Harry opens a chocolate frog card and reads about Albus Dumbledore. The description lists great achievements: his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald, his work with Nicholas Flamel, and his discovery of dragon blood's 12 uses. But tucked at the end is a curious line. He enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling, and has a scar above his left knee, which is a perfect map of the London Underground. For most readers, it is a passing joke, one more oddity attached to an eccentric headmaster, yet the detail lingers. Why the London Underground? Why a map? The scar points to something deeper. Dumbledore may be the most powerful wizard of his age, yet his body carries a reminder of the non-magical world. It ties him, in a strange and playful way, to Muggle life. The wizarding world often pretends to exist apart, sealed away in castles and hidden streets, but here is proof that the boundary is never complete. Dumbledore's scar is an invisible bridge. It suggests that magic and the everyday world overlap in unexpected ways, even within the person who embodies wizarding greatness. The London Underground is not random either. It is a network, a web of paths crossing under the city. In many ways, Dumbledore himself is such a map. He connects people, secrets and choices that span across both magical and non-magical lives. Later, when Harry learns how Dumbledore kept watch over him from Privet Drive, it becomes clear that this headmaster never turned away from the world outside Hogwarts. His scar is a playful clue to his double vision. He sees both the hidden and the ordinary. It is also a small lesson for Harry. At 11, Harry believes he is leaving one world behind for another. But the scar reminds us that the two worlds are not separate. The London Underground runs beneath both Muggles and wizards alike, unseen but connecting all. For Harry, this will become a central truth. He cannot cut himself off from his past, nor from the people who seem ordinary. In the end, the scar is more than a joke on a candy card. It is a quiet symbol that the journey between worlds has already begun. Number 12, Hagrid and his pink umbrella. Hagrid's pink umbrella is one of those objects that at first seems like a harmless quirk. A giant of a man carrying something so delicate feels almost like a joke, but the umbrella hides a broken wand, the remains of his old magical life. When Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts after being accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets, his wand was snapped. Yet he refused to let go of it completely. He tucked the pieces inside the umbrella, defying the Ministry's judgment in his quiet, stubborn way. We see this most clearly when he uses the umbrella to perform magic, even though it is forbidden. On Harry's birthday, Hagrid pulls it out and gives Dudley a pig's tail. The book describes it simply. He swung it sharply at Dudley, a flash of violet light. Dudley gave a cry of pain and grew a curly pig's tail protruding from the seat of his trousers. It's a comical moment, but behind the humour is something serious. Hagrid is still a wizard, even if the law insists he isn't. That umbrella is more than a tool. It is a symbol. It carries the memory of injustice, of a boy punished for a crime he didn't commit. It shows Hagrid's refusal to surrender his identity. He may not have the education or the rights of other wizards, but he clings to the fragments of what was taken from him. The umbrella is his rebellion against the rules that branded him as less. Later, this detail becomes part of a larger theme. The world of Harry Potter is full of prejudice. Giants like Hagrid, house elves like Dobby, even werewolves like Remus Lupin, all live under suspicion. Hagrid's umbrella foreshadows this. It whispers that the magical world is not as fair as it looks, and that those who are different must fight harder to hold on to who they are. In that simple pink umbrella, we see Hagrid's pain, his pride, and his unshakable loyalty to the life he was nearly denied. Number 13, the first mention of Nicholas Flamel. When Harry Potter first boards the Hogwarts Express and opens one of the enchanted chocolate frog packages, what seems like a small, almost humorous moment quietly plants the seed of the entire mystery that will later consume him and his friends. Inside, among the moving wizard cards that fascinate him, Harry finds his very first glimpse into the wider magical world. The card does not simply list Albus Dumbledore as a powerful headmaster, it ties him to a figure that at the time seems irrelevant and odd, Nicholas Flamel. This passing name, lost among mentions of dragon's blood and famous magical accomplishments, is Rowling's subtle way of whispering the secret long before her readers are ready to hear it. The chocolate frog card describes Dumbledore as having made notable contributions to the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and as a partner of Nicholas Flamel, noted for his work on alchemy. For a first-time reader, the phrase is buried among whimsical details, overshadowed by Harry's excitement at discovering that pictures in the wizarding world actually move. The card almost feels like comic relief, with Harry realizing that wizard suites come with collectible trading cards. Yet, in that single moment, Rowling has quietly introduced the central figure tied to the Philosopher's Stone, the very object Voldemort will pursue. It is an introduction so casual that few realize its importance until much later. By the time the children begin their investigations into the mysterious third-floor corridor, the name Nicolas Flamel re-emerges like a ghost from Harry's memory. Readers can look back and recall that indeed they had seen this name before, but perhaps dismissed it as one of Rowling's eccentric touches. In truth, this is one of her greatest narrative skills, planting vital clues in a way that they feel like world-building, not foreshadowing. When Harry reads the card, there is no ominous music, no glowing sign, just the clutter of detail that makes a fictional world feel alive. The trick is that among the clutter sits the very key to the plot. The mention of Flamel works because it is disguised as trivia. Rowling knows her audience at this point is as naive as Harry himself. Neither the boy nor the reader understands the stakes of the Philosopher's Stone yet. If the author had drawn too much attention to Flamel, the mystery would collapse under its own weight. Instead, the card feels like a child's introduction to magical celebrity culture, akin to collecting baseball cards. "I've got about 500, Ron tells Harry, which makes it sound like a silly game. The genius lies in the fact that one of those hundreds of names is not a silly fact at all, but the thread that will eventually unravel the main story. The subtlety becomes clear when we consider how readers experience this scene. On the first reading, most glide over Flamel's name without thought. On a second reading, however, it jumps off the page. One realizes that Rowling had been honest all along. She had already given the answer. It is the narrative equivalent of a magician placing the card in plain sight, letting the audience look at it, then distracting them with another flourish. Only later does the audience gasp, realizing the card was there from the start. Flamel himself is a fascinating choice because he is not entirely a fictional creation. The name Nicolas Flamel belongs to a real French scribe and manuscript seller from the 14th century, who in later legend became associated with alchemy and the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Rowling's use of a historical figure lends a special weight to her story. For young readers, it may simply be a wizard with an exotic name. For more knowledgeable readers, it is a wink to myth and folklore. By tucking the name into Dumbledore's card, she both grounds her fantasy in real legend and prepares her mystery for eventual revelation. As the book progresses, the moment of recognition becomes critical for the trio. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione struggle to remember who Flamel is, Hermione later triumphantly recalls the name from her own reading. It is a beautiful narrative symmetry. Harry's first chocolate frog card and Hermione's obsessive study habits collide to solve the riddle, yet the groundwork was already laid in Chapter 6, long before the suspense begins. The scene in the train compartment is not filler, it is carefully designed architecture. Rowling layers her mysteries like bricks, each insignificant alone, but together forming the structure that holds her story upright. Consider also the psychological effect on the reader. By the time the trio connects Flamel to the Philosopher's Stone, readers feel a spark of recognition. They remember seeing that name before, but only vaguely. This creates a sense of reward, as if the mystery had been solvable all along if only one had been paying better attention. It is a clever way of pulling readers deeper into the story, making them feel as though they are investigating alongside Harry, not merely watching. Rowling transforms what could have been a simple children's adventure into an interactive puzzle. The placement of this clue is also significant in terms of pacing. The early chapters of Philosopher's Stone are filled with wonder rather than conflict. Harry is discovering chocolate frogs, wizard chess, moving staircases and ghosts. The story is still gentle, without the shadow of Voldemort fully cast. To plant the name Flamel here is to hide a dagger inside a bouquet of flowers. The reader's guard is down, enchanted by the delightful new world. Later, when the darkness comes, we look back and see the knife was always there, disguised among sweets and toys. Number 14. Neville's Remembrall. Of all the curious objects in the early chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, few seem as deceptively simple as the round glass ball that Neville Longbottom receives in the mail. The Remembrall, as it is called, glows red whenever the person holding it has forgotten something. At first glance, it feels like comic relief, another whimsical piece of wizarding culture placed alongside chocolate frogs and exploding snap. Yet within that moment hides a curious gap that many readers pass over on their first reading. Neville never reveals what he has forgotten. The glass sphere fills with smoke, glows red, and the boy blushes awkwardly, but the text provides no answer. J.K. Rowling leaves the space open, as though inviting us to notice that forgetting itself can be more important than the forgotten detail. The book describes the scene with characteristic brevity. Neville had received a small, round glass ball that was full of white smoke, which, according to the note tied to it, would turn red when you had forgotten something. Moments later, in the crowded Great Hall, the ball glows crimson in Neville's hand. He exclaims in embarrassment, but nothing else is clarified. In the film adaptation, the moment is turned into a joke, with Neville realizing that he has forgotten to take off his cloak. It is a throwaway gag, played for laughs. But in the novel, no answer is given at all. The vagueness itself feels deliberate, a quiet gap in the story that hints at something larger than a mere child's forgetfulness. For Neville Longbottom, memory is not just a small schoolyard problem. Memory, and its absence, becomes the invisible thread of his entire life. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were tortured into madness by Death Eaters. They live in St. Mungo's hospital, unable to recognize their own son, locked in the fragments of broken minds. Neville grows up in the shadow of absence, raised by a stern grandmother who reminds him constantly of the family honor he must uphold. His story is defined by memory that is gone, memory that cannot be restored, memory that he alone must carry. Seen in this light, the glowing Remembrall feels less like a joke and more like an omen. It is striking how Rowling plants this symbol early on. Readers are introduced to Neville as clumsy, forgetful, constantly losing track of his belongings. He loses his toad, Trevor. He forgets passwords to the Gryffindor common room. He struggles to remember spells in class. The Remembrall seems like a fitting gift, as though the universe itself is mocking him. Yet the deeper irony is that Neville's most profound burden is not his own memory, but the absence of memory within his family. His parents' minds have been stolen, their memories erased by unimaginable cruelty. In a quiet way, Neville embodies the theme of memory more deeply than any other student at Hogwarts, even Harry himself, whose own forgotten past is at the heart of the saga. The detail that Neville does not say what he forgot in that moment allows the Remembrall to function as more than a comic prop. It becomes a mirror, a symbol of the unspeakable. What if Neville does not say because what he has forgotten is not a trivial detail but something so personal he cannot speak of it? Or perhaps Rowling simply leaves the silence to echo with meaning. Neville lives in a world where forgetting is both constant and devastating. The scarlet glow is an image of that invisible weight. Readers may laugh and turn the page, but the color red lingers. Throughout the series, Neville's forgetfulness often hides his true strength. In Philosopher's Stone itself, it is Neville who tries to stop Harry, Ron, and Hermione from leaving the Gryffindor common room. His courage earns him the final 10 points that secure Gryffindor the House Cup. In that moment, Neville remembers what matters most. Loyalty to rules, loyalty to what he has been taught is right. The boy who cannot recall his homework becomes the boy whose name is etched in the tally of Gryffindor's triumph. The forgotten transforms into the unforgettable. If one looks closer, Neville's Remembrall scene resonates with the larger theme of selective memory in the wizarding world. Harry himself spends much of the first book piecing together fragments of his forgotten past, his parents' deaths, his true identity, the story of Voldemort. Dumbledore guards secrets about the stone, hiding knowledge until the right moment. Even the Mirror of Erised, appearing later in the book, is a device about memory and longing. It shows Harry the family he lost, the faces he cannot recall. In this context, Neville's glowing Remembrall is not trivial at all. It quietly joins a chorus of objects that reflect on the fragile, haunting power of memory. What makes the moment more powerful is the way readers only understand its weight retrospectively. When first encountered, the scene is background detail, barely worth a second thought. But after reaching Order of the Phoenix, when we finally see Neville's parents in St. Mungo's, the earlier moment transforms in retrospect. There, in the hospital, Neville accepts a gum wrapper from his mother, a nonsensical gift from a broken mind, and he tucks it away carefully, as though it were treasure. Memory, or its fragments, define his world. Returning in thought to that glowing ball of smoke in his first year, one cannot help but feel the shiver of foreshadowing. Number 15, Goblins and their role. Of all the small moments in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, few seem more easily overlooked than Hagrid's offhand warning about goblins. When he and Harry travel to Gringotts, the wizarding bank in London, Hagrid tells him, "Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe, except maybe Hogwarts. There's nothing safer, not a safer place. Of course, it's run by goblins." Then he adds with a grumble, "You'd be mad to try and rob it. Better not mess with goblins, Harry." On a first reading, this appears to be no more than colour, an atmospheric detail about a strange new world. But in retrospect, this small caution becomes an early thread of foreshadowing, suggesting the complexities of goblin relations that will later dominate crucial storylines, particularly around themes of ownership, trust, and betrayal. The moment at Gringotts initially reads like a piece of exposition designed to heighten Harry's sense of awe. Harry is 11, new to magic, overwhelmed by everything, and Rowling weaves the visit to the bank as one of the first great spectacles. Carts rattling along underground tracks, vaults sealed with ancient keys, and the chill presence of creatures who are not wizards, yet wield an undeniable authority in this world. The goblin who leads Harry and Hagrid, Griphook, is described with a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and very long fingers. Harry sees him as another odd figure of the wizarding world. The real weight of Hagrid's warning, however, lies not in Harry's reaction, but in what readers later come to realize: the goblins are not mere background decoration, but one of the central forces shaping wizarding society, often in the shadows. It is significant that Gringotts is introduced so early in the narrative. Before Harry even sets foot at Hogwarts, the first institution of magical Britain he experiences is not the Ministry of Magic, not a school, but a bank run by non-human beings. This is Rowling's way of placing power dynamics on the stage from the very beginning. The goblins are guardians of wealth, of secrets, of treasures, like the tiny golden Philosopher's Stone, hidden in the deepest vault. When Hagrid warns against crossing them, readers might simply see him as delivering a comic exaggeration. But with later knowledge, that phrase becomes heavy with meaning. Goblins will not be crossed lightly because they hold a view of the world very different from wizards, one defined by rigid interpretations of ownership and debt. The warning also plants an early seed of unease. Even as Harry marvels at the strange creatures, there is something slightly unsettling about Griphook's manner. Goblins are not affectionate or gentle. They are sharp-eyed, exacting, and seem to know far more than they reveal. Harry notices the way Griphook checks the vaults, the precision with which he handles the key, the odd smirk when he reminds Hagrid about the dangers of thieves. The tone is clear. These are not allies by default, but beings with their own loyalties and codes. Rowling gives readers a glimpse into a tension that will later erupt openly in the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione must return to Gringotts and negotiate with the very same Griphook whose views on ownership of Godric Gryffindor's sword will nearly destroy their alliance. What makes the early moment in Philosopher's Stone so clever is that it works on two levels. For a first-time reader, it simply builds the mythos of the magical world, suggesting that there are creatures beyond wizards with their own customs. For a reader familiar with the later books, it becomes a signpost. The goblins are introduced not for whimsy, but because their worldview will intersect painfully with Harry's journey. When Griphook later insists that the sword of Gryffindor belongs to goblins because they created it, not because it was passed down through wizarding tradition, we understand Hagrid's early words in a new light. Goblins are not to be trifled with because they have their own deep-rooted sense of justice, one that can clash fatally with wizarding assumptions. Hagrid himself, despite his warmth and humour, gives the warning with a kind of blunt seriousness. He knows that Harry does not yet grasp the complexities of magical politics, but Hagrid has lived long enough to sense the undercurrents. He works for Dumbledore, a man who sees the value of all magical beings, but he also carries prejudices shaped by the wizarding world. His phrasing, "better not mess with goblins," is tinged with both respect and wariness. The bank's power is absolute, yet the trust between wizards and goblins is fragile. Harry does not yet understand it, but he has been given his first glimpse into a theme that will haunt him in adulthood. Trust is not universal, and alliances are never guaranteed. The vault of the Philosopher's Stone becomes a powerful symbol in this regard. Hidden deep within Gringotts, guarded by goblins who demand absolute obedience to their rules, it represents the uneasy balance between wizarding ambition and goblin control. Harry watches as Hagrid retrieves a tiny package from the high-security vault, and Griphook reminds them that if anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there. This chilling warning is brushed aside by Hagrid, but it lingers. Goblins maintain control over treasures, and their methods of protection are ruthless. Readers later realize this is not merely about security, but about philosophy. For goblins, ownership is tied not to inheritance, but to craftsmanship and possession. Wizards, in their view, have stolen much over the centuries, and the vault becomes a stage where this quiet resentment is played out. Number 16. Dudley's Tail Scar. When Hagrid storms into the hut on the rock and finally confronts the Dursleys, it feels like a storm crashing into a stagnant pond. Vernon, Petunia, and Dudley have built their lives on the illusion that magic is something to be denied, ridiculed, or ignored, and yet in that single night, the truth arrives with the half-giant's fist smashing down the door. Among the many things that happen in that moment, Harry receiving his letter, Vernon blustering, Petunia trembling, there is also the unforgettable image of Dudley clutching his backside in horror after Hagrid, unable to control his temper, gives him a curly pig's tail. Readers often remember this scene as comedic justice, the spoiled boy finally punished for his greed. But tucked away within the laughter is a detail that most first-time readers let slip away. Dudley's tail is surgically removed later, and it leaves behind a scar. That scar is not merely a medical after-effect, but a permanent marker that the Dursleys cannot erase, no matter how much they wish to bury all traces of magic. The tale is first presented almost as slapstick. Dudley, already terrified, dives behind his mother when Hagrid draws his pink umbrella like a weapon. When Hagrid's patience breaks, the text tells us, he took up his umbrella and whirled it over his head. "Never insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me," he roared. And with that, he brought the umbrella swishing down through the air. To point at Dudley, there was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and the next second Dudley was dancing on the spot, with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. The immediate effect is absurd and hilarious. Dudley, who had moments earlier stuffed himself with the cake Harry should have eaten, suddenly suffers the indignity of sprouting a tail. The family flees in outrage, humiliated, but the incident does not simply vanish. Rowling ensures that this moment leaves a trace, both physical and symbolic. Later, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, there is a small but telling note. The Dursleys take Dudley to a hospital to have the tail surgically removed, and the boy is left with a scar. The presence of this scar is more than just a throwaway comment. It is a narrative seed that plants itself in the mind of a careful reader. Magic, Rowling suggests, is not something that can be undone with a wave of a scalpel or denied by the strength of human stubbornness. It leaves marks, and those marks, like Harry's lightning-shaped scar, remind the reader that the wizarding world does not exist in a separate bubble. It collides with ordinary life and leaves behind permanent imprints. The scar on Dudley is important precisely because it parallels Harry's own. Harry's scar is central to the entire series, the physical evidence of a curse meant to kill, a constant reminder of his parents' sacrifice, and an anchor connecting him to Voldemort. Dudley's scar is nothing so grand, but in its small way it mirrors the same truth. The Dursleys, who wanted nothing more than to shut magic out of their lives, find themselves forced to confront the fact that magic has left a mark on their son. Petunia can scrub the kitchen spotless, Vernon can burn Harry's letters, and Dudley can pout until he is showered with gifts, but none of them can erase what Hagrid has done. The world they want to deny has literally scarred them. This detail deepens the comedy into something darker. When Hagrid transforms Dudley's behind, readers laugh, but scars are not funny. Scars are permanent. They speak of wounds, violence, memory. Rowling slips this reminder into the narrative almost invisibly. Many readers laugh at Dudley's predicament and move on, forgetting that the boy had to endure the humiliation of surgery and the pain of recovery, left with a mark he will carry into adulthood. Imagine, years later, Dudley seeing that scar in the mirror and remembering the night a giant burst into his family's life. The scar becomes a physical embodiment of trauma, a trace of the night their carefully constructed reality cracked open. What makes this detail especially striking is the Dursleys' obsessive desire for normality. From the first pages, Vernon Dursley is described as a man who hates imagination, strangeness, or anything outside the bounds of ordinary life. Petunia has long buried her resentment of her magical sister, choosing instead to smother Harry and pretend magic does not exist. Dudley is raised as the embodiment of their philosophy, spoiled, loud, utterly mundane. But the scar refuses to conform. It is an uninvited truth. No matter how the Dursleys insist that magic is abnormal, their son's scar proves otherwise. It is as if magic has branded them with a signature. You cannot escape me. This interplay between denial and evidence is what gives the detail its weight. The Dursleys spend the series trying to control Harry, to erase his identity as a wizard, to drag him back into their definition of normality, but their very own son carries proof that magic touches them as well. They cannot lock the scar away in the cupboard under the stairs. It belongs to Dudley. In a way, this scar is the first reminder that the Dursleys are not outside the reach of the magical world. Later, when Dementors attack Dudley in Little Whinging, he experiences another mark, psychological rather than physical, that again connects him to magic's reality. The scar from Hagrid's spell foreshadows this inevitability. Rowling's storytelling thrives on such small but powerful echoes. Harry's scar is the emblem of his destiny, a mark that makes him different but also ties him to his enemy. Dudley's scar is not a destiny but a consequence. It is the consequence of his family's cruelty toward Harry and their attempt to insult Dumbledore. It shows that magic punishes arrogance, even if unintentionally. Hagrid's act, though rash, carries a moral weight. Disrespect and cruelty are not without consequence. Dudley is branded as evidence of that truth. There is also something almost poetic in how scars function in Rowling's world. Scars are reminders of the past, but they are also symbols of survival. Harry survives the killing curse and bears its lightning bolt. Dumbledore carries a scar of the London Underground map, a whimsical detail that again ties magic to reality. Dudley's scar, while less noble, is nonetheless a sign of having lived through something extraordinary. It is not the mark of a hero, but it still signifies contact with the extraordinary world he pretends does not exist. The Dursleys' desperate attempts at control cannot erase it. If one imagines Dudley later in life, grown out of his childhood cruelty, and perhaps softened by his adult friendship with Harry, that scar may even transform in meaning. No longer just a humiliation, it becomes a reminder that his family once lived in denial, and that denial came at a cost. When Harry and Dudley share their awkward cup of tea in the Deathly Hallows, there is an unspoken recognition between them. Dudley's gratitude, his stammered, "I don't think you're a waste of space," shows that he has begun to confront the truth. His scar might linger as part of that reckoning, an invisible thread binding him to the world he once mocked. The theme of scars also broadens into a larger commentary about magic itself. Magic in Rowling's world is never clean or reversible. Mistakes leave consequences, and even deliberate spells often carry side effects. Memory charms can break, curses can leave residual damage. Even something as light-hearted as a tale on a spoiled boy cannot be completely undone. The surgeon can cut it away, but the body remembers. Rowling invites the reader to laugh, but she also whispers, that nothing magical ever vanishes entirely. The Dursleys, who thought they could bury Harry's heritage, discover that even their own flesh now bears witness against them. The smallness of this detail is part of its brilliance. A casual mention of Dudley's scar could be overlooked, and yet, once noticed, it radiates meaning backward and forward across the narrative. It casts the Dursleys' stubbornness in a new light. They are not simply hateful, but wounded by truth they refuse to acknowledge. It deepens Dudley's role, foreshadowing that he will not remain untouched by the wizarding world. It enriches the motif of scars as signs of memory, survival, and consequence, and it reinforces the novel's central theme. Magic is real, unavoidable, and permanent. The humour of Hagrid's impulsive punishment becomes, in retrospect, a layered moment. Children laugh at Dudley squealing with a tail, while adults recognise the cruelty of leaving a boy scarred, the inevitability of consequences, and the futility of denial. It is this layering that gives Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone its enduring power. Beneath the whimsy lies depth. Beneath the joke lies permanence. Dudley Dursley, the poster child for indulgent normality, carries a scar that tells a story his parents would rather forget. And that scar, like all scars in Rowling's work, whispers the truth. The magical world leaves traces, and those traces endure. Number 17, The Sorting Hat's Warning. When the sorting hat was placed on Harry Potter's head in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the narrative offered a moment that many readers treat as a simple touch of suspense. The Great Hall is filled with students, the house tables are waiting, and Harry dreads the possibility of being put in Slytherin. But Rowling planted something far more significant than a dramatic pause. The hat whispers, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, there's no doubt about that." This line is not filler, it is the first real sign that Harry is not just a boy with a scar, but someone whose soul stands on the edge of two very different paths. From this instant, the books become not only a story about a war with Voldemort, but a chronicle of one boy's choices that prevent him from becoming Voldemort himself. The hat's suggestion that Harry would do well in Slytherin is striking when considered alongside Tom Riddle's own journey. Riddle, sorted into Slytherin decades earlier, heard the same words of potential whispered about him by his professors. Dumbledore later admits in The Chamber of Secrets that the two boys shared unusual similarities. They were orphans, they grew up unloved, and they entered Hogwarts with a longing to belong. That Harry might have joined Slytherin is not a casual remark. It foreshadows the revelation in the Chamber of Secrets that Harry and Voldemort's wands share the same phoenix feather, tying their destinies together. The Sorting Hat is the first to reveal to us that the line separating Harry from Voldemort is paper-thin, and it rests entirely on the choices Harry will make. Consider how Harry responds to this temptation. He does not merely reject the hat's offer in fear, he actively insists, "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin." The choice is deliberate, and it is the first exercise of willpower that defines his moral compass. Had he remained passive, the hat would have placed him in Slytherin and shaped his ambition toward greatness at any cost. This is the genius of Rowling's storytelling. The scene is not about whether Gryffindor is better than Slytherin, it is about whether Harry will follow the thread of destiny that pushes him toward Voldemort's shadow, or pull away and carve a different identity. Every act that follows in the series, every battle, every friendship, every sacrifice, stems from this primal moment of defiance. Readers often overlook that the hat does not tell Harry he would be bad in Slytherin. Quite the opposite. It praises his ambition, his cunning, his resourcefulness, qualities that later save his life countless times. When Harry plots with Ron and Hermione to stop Professor Quirrell from stealing the stone, he uses bold risk-taking that might have been celebrated by Salazar Slytherin himself. When he sneaks into the restricted section of the library, when he masterminds the plan to rescue Sirius Black from the tower, in The Prisoner of Azkaban when he leads Dumbledore's army in the Order of the Phoenix. All of these moments reveal traits that the Hat recognized in him. The truth is not that Harry lacked Slytherin qualities, it is that he refused to let them define him. That tension becomes the silent heartbeat of the entire saga. This is what makes the Hat's words so chilling in hindsight. Voldemort, as Tom Riddle, once stood at a similar threshold. The young Riddle also had the potential to choose another way. Dumbledore himself tells Harry in The Half-Blood Prince that choices define who we truly are, far more than abilities. When the Hat tempts Harry, it gives him the opportunity to prove that he is not Riddle's mirror image. Yet the closeness of their natures cannot be ignored. Rowling builds suspense by making readers realize that Harry's heroism is not guaranteed. It is not simply his destiny to be good. It is the constant resistance against the easy slide into darkness that makes him heroic. The decision becomes even more poignant when we recall that Slytherin House produced not only Voldemort but also figures like Severus Snape. Snape himself embodies the ambiguity of Slytherin, showing that one can carry ambition and cunning, yet still sacrifice everything for love. Harry's hatred of the idea of being associated with Slytherin stems from the stories he heard on the train from Ron Weasley, who describes Slytherin as the house where you-know-who was. But the deeper narrative is that Harry fears seeing his own shadow reflected in those green and silver colors. His dread is not of the house itself, but of what it suggests about his own identity. This conflict resurfaces again and again throughout the books. When Harry hears Parseltongue for the first time in the Chamber of Secrets, he realizes with horror that he can speak the language of snakes, a mark of Salazar Slytherin himself. His classmates suspect him of being the heir of Slytherin, and Harry begins to question whether the Hat was right. Could he have belonged in that house after all? This doubt gnaws at him until Dumbledore reassures him. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. That reassurance ties directly back to the moment with the Sorting Hat. The Hat knew he had the abilities. Harry proves again and again that his choices will steer him differently. Rowling cleverly uses the Hat scene as a seed that blossoms in later books. By the time of the Goblet of Fire, when Harry is forced into the Triwizard Tournament, his ability to think strategically and survive challenges reveals the Slytherin traits that live within him. He uses cunning to outwit dragons, to navigate the Black Lake and to escape Voldemort in the graveyard. Yet he never uses these traits for selfish ambition. He channels them toward protecting others, toward resisting tyranny. The Hat's suggestion becomes less of a prophecy and more of a test. Will Harry use the talents of a Slytherin in the service of Voldemort, or in the service of defying him? Perhaps the most haunting reminder of that first choice comes in The Order of the Phoenix, when Harry experiences dreams through Voldemort's mind. He feels the snake's perspective, the lure of violence, the thrill of power. He confesses to Sirius Black that he feels so angry all the time and wonders if he is becoming more like Voldemort. The Sorting Hat's voice from years earlier echoes in these moments. You could be great. What saves Harry from drowning in this fear is his loyalty to his friends and his capacity to love, qualities that Voldemort never understood. This divergence proves that the Hat was correct in recognizing Harry's potential for greatness, but it underestimated the depth of his moral core. The tension explodes in the Deathly Hallows when Harry finally walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet his death. At that moment, the greatness the Hat promised is realized not through power, but through sacrifice. Voldemort sought greatness through domination. Harry achieves it through selflessness. And yet the possibility that Harry could have turned the other way never disappears. The Hat's early words remind the reader that Harry's path was not predetermined. His greatness was not handed to him. It was wrestled from the grip of temptation and fear. That is why the series resonates so deeply. The line between light and darkness is not between two different people, but within the same person. One detail that deserves attention is how Rowling portrays the sorting hat itself. The hat is not an impartial judge, it is a relic of the founders, imbued with their biases and priorities. Salazar Slytherin's voice is present in its judgments just as Godric Gryffindor's is. When it tells Harry he would do well in Slytherin, it is channeling the ambition of Salazar, not an objective truth. This makes Harry's resistance even more significant. He is not only defying a magical artifact, he is resisting the pull of a 1,000-year-old ideology that once split the founders of Hogwarts. His "not Slytherin" is an echo of Gryffindor's opposition to Slytherin at the school's founding. The most beautiful irony is that Harry's final defeat of Voldemort in the Great Hall of Hogwarts occurs in front of the students of every house. He uses the Elder Wand, a weapon tied to ambition and cunning, but he wields it not for conquest but for liberation. In that moment, the qualities the Sorting Hat recognized in him, ambition, cleverness, determination, are finally united with the courage and loyalty of Gryffindor. The conflict that began on the stool with the hat resolves at last. Harry becomes proof that a person can carry Slytherin's traits without being consumed by them. This single scene in the first book therefore changes the way we read the entire saga. When Harry hears the hat whisper about greatness and power, Rowling is whispering to us, the readers, about the central theme, the similarity between Harry and Voldemort. Their connection is not only in prophecy or in wands, but in personality, in potential, in choices. Every subsequent book returns to that truth. The difference between them is not fate, not blood, not ability. It is choice. And it is in that small, easily overlooked moment when a boy whispers, "Not Slytherin," that the destiny of the wizarding world begins to turn. Number 18, the first meeting with Hedwig. When Harry Potter walks into the small shop in Diagon Alley with Hagrid on his 11th birthday, he does not expect that one of the most significant companions of his life will be waiting for him inside. The description in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is quick and almost fleeting. Inside the cage was a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. At a first reading, this moment feels like nothing more than a practical gift from Hagrid, a token to celebrate Harry's entry into the magical world. Yet beneath its simple surface lies a symbol that becomes one of the strongest threads of loyalty, freedom, and connection in Harry's life. Hedwig is not merely an owl, she is the first piece of true belonging Harry has ever owned, and she arrives at the very moment when his exile at Privet Drive ends. The symbolism is powerful when contrasted with Harry's life before that day. For years he lived in a cupboard under the stairs, ignored or mocked by Vernon and Petunia Dursley, and bullied by Dudley. He had no friends, no gifts, no affection, nothing that told him he mattered. On his birthdays he received nothing more than Dudley's old socks or a broken toy. Suddenly, on his 11th birthday, he receives not just knowledge of his magical heritage, but also a living creature that reflects dignity and companionship. The book emphasizes her appearance as a snowy owl, majestic and dignified, an image so different from the drab, colorless environment of Privet Drive. Hedwig's arrival is more than a gift. It is an assertion that Harry has entered a world where he is valued and seen. The timing is no accident. Rowling places Hedwig into Harry's life at the precise moment when he leaves behind loneliness. When Hagrid tells him, "Got you a present," the reader sees more than a friendly gesture. Hedwig becomes the first friend that does not judge Harry, does not mock him for his scar, and does not envy him for fame he never asked for. She sits in his room at the Leaky Cauldron, listens to him in silence, and becomes the steady presence that assures him he is no longer alone. The contrast with the Dursleys is striking. In a house where no one listened, he suddenly has a creature that is loyal, attentive, and dependable. One might overlook the deeper meaning of her role as a post owl. She is not just a pet to stroke, she is a literal channel of communication. Letters in the wizarding world carry weight far beyond their paper and ink. With Hedwig, Harry gains a voice. For the first time in his life, he can send his thoughts out into the world and expect a response. When he is forced back to Privet Drive during the summer, Hedwig allows him to stay connected to Ron and Hermione. Without her, the Dursleys' isolation would have swallowed him whole. This is why her first appearance in the shop matters. Freedom comes not only from leaving Privet Drive, but also from having the ability to speak and be heard. The way Rowling describes Hedwig underscores her symbolic role. Snowy owls are rare, striking, and regal. Unlike the common brown or tawny owls used by other students, Harry's owl is dazzlingly white, almost luminous against the gloom of the Muggle world. She represents purity and independence. Her feathers catch the reader's imagination, and even before she has delivered her first letter, she embodies the magical world's difference from the grey monotony of the Dursleys' world. To Harry, who has never owned anything beautiful, this owl is a revelation. The text highlights the moment. It was the best birthday present he had ever received. The line sounds simple, but for Harry, who never had a real birthday present in his life, it is devastatingly true. The emotional bond between Harry and Hedwig builds quietly from this first scene. She is present when he writes desperate letters, when he sulks in Privet Drive, and when he celebrates victories at Hogwarts. She is not human, yet Rowling paints her with a personality that readers recognize as wise, proud, and affectionate. The owl glares when Harry ignores her, nips him when he takes her for granted, and soothes him when he feels forgotten. This bond begins in that dusty shop in Diagon Alley, a detail easy to skim past on a first read, but heavy with foreshadowing for years to come. What makes this detail even richer is the juxtaposition with Hagrid himself. Hagrid is the one who rescues Harry from the Dursleys and opens the door to magic, but Hagrid also knows loneliness and the pain of being an outsider. By giving Hedwig, he provides Harry not just with a tool, but with a companion that represents what both of them have lacked for years: acceptance. Hagrid's gesture is clumsy and heartfelt, perfectly in line with his character. He does not give Harry sweets, toys, or clothes, things Harry never had anyway. Instead, he gives him a living friend who will always return to him. It is Hagrid's way of telling Harry that he never again has to endure silence and neglect. Consider also the narrative irony. Harry, who has spent his childhood locked away and treated like a burden, receives a creature whose very nature is flight. Hedwig's wings are the opposite of cupboard walls. Her ability to soar above the roofs of Privet Drive and return with letters is an image of liberation. When Harry watches her disappear into the night sky, he watches the proof that he belongs to something greater. Hedwig embodies his new freedom, reminding him that his life will never again be bound by the Dursleys' cruelty. Rowling does not state this outright, but the symbolism hums beneath the text. As the story progresses, Hedwig becomes Harry's anchor during summers. Readers remember the letters she delivers from Ron and Hermione, each one a lifeline. Yet all of this begins with that quiet moment in Diagon Alley when Harry first lays eyes on her. It is significant that Rowling chose to introduce Hedwig before Harry even sets foot in Hogwarts. She is part of the foundation of his magical life, a companion whose loyalty predates his friendships with Ron, Hermione, or even his rivalry with Draco Malfoy. She is there before the Sorting Hat, before the first broomstick ride, before the first Quidditch match. She precedes it all, and so she represents the very beginning of Harry's true life. In a way, Hedwig is also Harry's first possession that truly belongs to him. His wand chooses him, but it is bound by destiny. His schoolbooks are requirements, his robes are uniforms, but Hedwig is his choice, his gift, his companion. He takes pride in her, and she takes pride in him. This personal ownership matters because Harry has never owned anything before. His toys and clothes were always Dudley's cast-offs. With Hedwig, Harry claims his own identity. The snowy owl perched on his shoulder or resting in her cage is a visible marker that he is no longer the boy in the cupboard. The text itself provides subtle cues that Hedwig is more than background detail. In Philosopher's Stone, Rowling often describes her as intelligent and dignified, words usually reserved for people, not animals. When Harry talks to her in his room, readers sense that she understands. "She nibbled his ear affectionately," the book notes, a simple line, but one that conveys affection equal to a human hug. These small moments accumulate until the reader realizes that Hedwig is not just a pet, she is a character with agency, emotion, and meaning. When readers return to the series after finishing all 7 books, the weight of Hedwig's first appearance deepens. Her tragic end in Deathly Hallows redefines the significance of her entrance in Diagon Alley. Her life comes full circle. She is with Harry at the moment he leaves the Dursleys behind for the first time, and she dies at the moment he leaves them behind forever. Her death is a symbol of Harry's final break from childhood, but that makes her first appearance even more poignant. From the beginning, she was tied to his freedom and his new life, and in her death she signals the end of innocence. But none of this impact could exist without that first detail of the majestic snowy owl in the shop. The artistry of Rowling's storytelling lies in these seemingly small details. Hedwig's arrival is overshadowed by Ollivander's mysterious wand speech or the wonder of Gringotts' underground vault. Yet hidden in plain sight is a symbol that defines Harry's emotional journey. For readers who speed past the scene, Hedwig is only a pet. For those who pause, she is a declaration that Harry's years of solitude are over. When he strokes her feathers for the first time, he is not only touching an owl, but touching the first tangible proof that he is worthy of love and connection. Looking back, one realizes that Hedwig's first appearance encapsulates the heart of the entire series. Loneliness turned into belonging, isolation turned into friendship, captivity turned into freedom. Harry does not yet know that his battles will be long and his losses deep, but in that dusty shop he discovers that he will never again fight alone. Hedwig may not speak, but her silent presence from that day forward tells him a truth he had never known, that his life matters and that he is part of a world that will claim him as its own. Number 19, The Troll and Hermione's Lie. Of all the episodes in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the troll scene in the girls' bathroom is one of those moments that can be dismissed as a comic detour, a monster fight meant to raise the stakes and amuse the reader. Yet when examined carefully, this is the turning point that transforms 3 children, Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Hermione Granger, from reluctant acquaintances into the inseparable trio who would later carry the fate of the wizarding world. The incident is written with humor and tension, but beneath it lies the quiet birth of loyalty, sacrifice, and truth-twisting for the sake of friendship. It is a moment where characters reveal who they will become, even if they do not realize it yet. Harry and Ron are not looking for trouble that evening, though trouble is always drawn to Harry like a magnet. They hear from their fellow Gryffindors that Hermione, humiliated earlier by Ron's careless insult about her personality, "It's no wonder no one can stand her," he had said, has locked herself in the bathroom. At the same time, Professor Quirrell bursts into the Great Hall, stammering that a troll has entered the dungeons. In the chaos, everyone is sent back to their dormitories, but Harry suddenly realizes that Hermione knows nothing of the danger. Without hesitation, he and Ron rush off. This decision is reckless, but it already shows the instinctive courage and loyalty that define them. Rowling writes, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. "Hermione! She doesn't know about the troll!" This single realization sets their path. The description of the troll is intentionally grotesque, a mixture of comedy and menace. It was 12 feet tall, its skin a dull granite grey, its great lumpy body like a boulder with a small bald head perched on top with a short, thick neck. Its stupidity is matched only by its size, making the scene absurd as much as frightening. Yet in this comic danger, Rowling places the three characters in their first life-or-death collaboration. They are unprepared, wandless in terms of actual magical skill, relying instead on bravery and improvisation. The troll represents not only a physical obstacle, but the first real test of their bond. When Harry leaps onto the troll's back, trying to shove his wand up its nose, the scene is almost slapstick. Still behind the absurdity lies the pure impulse of self-sacrifice. He has known Hermione only a few months, and she has spent much of that time being insufferable in his eyes, correcting him in class, showing off her knowledge and acting superior. Yet when danger strikes, Harry's instinct is to risk himself. He does not stop to calculate whether she is worth saving. That leap signals his nature, one who throws himself forward for others, no matter the personal cost. Ron's role is equally telling. Until now, Ron has been characterized as loyal but insecure, overshadowed by his many siblings and self-conscious about his lack of distinction. In the bathroom, however, he becomes the one who delivers the decisive blow. With Harry shouting encouragement, Ron raises his wand and performs a successful levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa! The club wrenched itself out of the troll's hand, rose high in the air, and came down on its own head with a sickening crack. This is not just the defeat of the troll, but Ron's first heroic act, born from his own effort. He, who earlier had mocked Hermione for obsessing over the spell, now uses that very charm to save her life. Rowling carefully turns ridicule into redemption, demonstrating how quickly roles can change when courage is required. And then comes the quiet, easily missed, but crucial moment, the lie Hermione tells the professors. When Professors McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell arrive, they are horrified. McGonagall demands an explanation, and it is Hermione who steps forward. She says, "It's my fault, Professor McGonagall. I went looking for the troll. I thought I could deal with it on my own. If Harry and Ron hadn't found me, I'd be dead now. Harry and Ron were just trying to save me." This is a shocking choice for Hermione. Until this point, she has been the student who reveres rules, who prides herself on doing everything correctly, who looks down on those who bend the rules for their own gain. Yet here, she lies outright to a teacher to protect Harry and Ron from punishment. This moment is subtle but vital. The Hermione we met at the start of the book would never have done this. She was the girl who corrected Ron's pronunciation of Leviosa, who bragged about knowing all the spells before even arriving at Hogwarts, who lived by the book and by the rules. By choosing to lie, she acknowledges something more important than regulations, human connection, loyalty, and gratitude. Her priorities shift. She begins to understand that wisdom is not merely about knowing everything, but about knowing when to stand with people. Harry and Ron, in turn, accept this new Hermione with little hesitation. They are surprised, but they recognize the meaning of her action, the narrator observes with deliberate simplicity. From that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. The language is light, even humorous, but it captures a profound truth. Shared danger forges bonds faster than months of ordinary interaction. This friendship is not superficial. Without Hermione's lie, Harry and Ron would likely have faced punishment, perhaps even expulsion, for reckless behavior. Without their bravery, Hermione would have been seriously hurt or killed. Each has saved the other. The balance of debt creates equality among them, erasing previous annoyances or grievances. When Hermione later becomes their guiding intellect in solving mysteries, the foundation of trust has already been laid in this absurd bathroom brawl. The troll scene also reveals Rowling's craftsmanship in foreshadowing. Later, time and again, these three will rely on a combination of Harry's reckless courage, Ron's instinctive action, and Hermione's loyalty that sometimes manifests through bending rules. This very pattern is rehearsed in miniature during the troll fight. Harry leaps in, Ron delivers the decisive move, Hermione bends truth to protect them. Readers may laugh at the Trolls Club crashing down on its own head, but the deeper message is that their complementary strengths create survival. It is also significant that Hermione's first lie to authority is not selfish. She does not invent an excuse to protect herself from blame, but deliberately places herself in the wrong to shield her friends. This is her transformation from the isolated, rule-bound student to a loyal companion who can see the bigger picture. The Hermione who emerges from that bathroom is no longer a solitary know-it-all, but the Hermione who would one day brew Polyjuice Potion illegally, who would help form Dumbledore's army, and who would walk with Harry into mortal danger. The seed is planted here in her first choice to value friendship above obedience. For Harry, this moment also teaches that not all friendships are born out of similarity. He and Ron had mocked Hermione, avoided her company, and found her irritating. Yet once the troll incident occurs, he realizes that bonds form through shared trials rather than personal preference. It prepares him for the lifelong truth that allies come in unexpected forms, and that true loyalty often arises when least expected. Ron, too, learns something essential. He had ridiculed Hermione's academic obsession and mocked her for her rigidity. Yet when his levitation spell fells the troll, he sees the value of the very knowledge she pushed upon him. Their relationship evolves from irritation into mutual respect. Hermione will still frustrate Ron with her perfectionism, but deep down he never forgets that he once saved her with her own lesson. That irony binds them in ways words cannot. The humour of the scene, the troll's stupidity, Harry's wand stuck up its nose, the absurdity of children battling a monster, should not obscure the gravity of what it represents. Rowling disguises a pivotal moment in the cloak of comedy. Readers may skim through amused, eager to reach the next mystery. Yet hidden here is the genesis of a partnership that would shape the entire series. Without this bathroom encounter, the story of Harry Potter would unravel before it even began. The troll is defeated, professors are appeased, the children return to their dormitory. Nothing outwardly changes in Hogwarts that night, but for Harry, Ron, and Hermione, everything has shifted. They are no longer simply classmates sharing lessons. They have tested fear, faced death, and chosen loyalty. The rest of their adventures, the chess game, the challenges guarding the stone, the battles yet to come, are possible only because of the trust built in this absurd confrontation with a 12-foot troll. Rowling presents it quietly, almost playfully, but it is the fulcrum on which the balance of their story rests. The reader who rushes through may see the troll scene as action, as comic relief, as one more obstacle before the final revelation of the Philosopher's Stone. But the careful reader sees more. The friendships that define the saga are born here. Hermione Granger's first lie, Harry Potter's reckless leap, Ron Weasley's decisive charm, all combine to create not just a victory over a clumsy monster, but the beginning of a lifelong bond. What appears to be a detour is in fact the true beginning of the story. Number 20, Ron's first gift to Harry. Under the stone walls of Hogwarts, when the echoes of the final feast faded and the candles burned low, a small gesture passed almost unnoticed. Ron Weasley, still flushed with the excitement of Gryffindor's unexpected triumph in the House Cup, slipped Harry a chocolate frog. It was not wrapped in gilded ceremony, nor did it arrive with the dramatic flourish of wands or ancient prophecies. It was a simple, sweet, something any student could find at the trolley on the Hogwarts Express. Yet for Harry, that small square of enchanted chocolate meant more than all the gold hidden in Gringotts. For the boy who had grown up in a cupboard under the stairs, whose only birthday presents had been Dudley's discarded socks or Uncle Vernon's threats to behave, the frog was more than a treat. It was the first true gift of friendship, unburdened by mockery or pity, and it carried within it the unspoken message, "You belong." Harry had lived his first 11 years in a world where gifts were twisted into insult. On his 10th birthday, the Dursleys gave him a coat hanger. On another, Aunt Petunia presented him with a tissue, as though charity could be disguised as cruelty. Even Dudley's excess of toys highlighted the imbalance, for when Harry was allowed nothing, his cousin was drowning in abundance. Rowling makes this plain early in Philosopher's Stone. For his 11th birthday, Harry got a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Such humiliations carved into him a deep sense that no one would ever offer something to him purely out of affection. That absence of kindness built a hunger greater than the emptiest stomach. It was a hunger for acknowledgement, for proof that he was worthy of being seen. Then came Hogwarts, and with it, Ron. Their friendship began not with ceremony, but with a sandwich and a shared train compartment. Ron's awkward honesty, his patched robes, and his hand-me-down wand told Harry that this was not someone pretending to be more than he was. Their connection grew during the year, in chess matches, in whispered jokes, during Snape's lessons, in late-night adventures across the castle's shifting staircases. By the time they descended into the trapdoor to protect the Philosopher's Stone, their bond was tempered by fire. Ron's sacrifice in the giant wizard chess game was the moment that proved it most clearly. As Harry looked at his fallen friend, he realized that Ron was willing to put himself in harm's way for him, not because he was the boy who lived, but because he was Harry. And yet, when the year ended, it was not Ron's bravery that crystallized in Harry's memory, but the quiet chocolate frog he offered. The war against Voldemort seemed distant in that instant. For Harry, who had just faced death, who had stood in the presence of Quirrell's dissolving body and felt the raw power of love as a shield, this gift was grounding. It reminded him that he was not simply a chess piece in some ancient battle. He was a boy with a friend, being given something sweet after a long year. Rowling captures this subtlety in the way she allows the small gestures to carry as much weight as the grand battles. The frog was not about food, it was about care. Consider the contrast. At Privet Drive, every gesture was about control. When the Dursleys gave Harry something, it was to remind him of his place beneath them. A coat hanger is not a gift, it is a message. You are worthless. At Hogwarts, Ron's frog said the opposite. You matter enough for me to share what is mine. It is not grand, it is not rare, but it is yours. It is a gesture without strings, and for Harry, this was revolutionary. To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure, Dumbledore tells him in the hospital wing, but Harry's heart was still rooted in the simpler adventures, like the discovery that someone might want to give him a piece of chocolate just to make him smile. The chocolate frog itself carries symbolism deeper than its sugar. These frogs are collector's items, each carrying cards of famous witches and wizards. Harry's first frog on the train gave him the card of Albus Dumbledore, a name that became central to his destiny. To receive another at the close of the year, this time from Ron, is like a closing of a circle. The first frog introduced him to the world of magic. The second frog confirmed that he belonged in it. The frog became more than a sweet. It was a talisman of transition, a bridge from the cupboard under the stairs to the great hall of Hogwarts, from loneliness to belonging. What makes this moment so powerful is its ordinariness. Stories are built on battles and villains, but lives are built on gestures. Harry's survival against Voldemort was epic, but what would remain with him were the small moments that proved love existed in the quiet places. Ron's gift, as tiny as it was, echoed louder than Quirrell's screams. It reminded him that while Dark Lords seek immortality, true victory lies in kindness. In that way, the chocolate frog is as central to the story as the Philosopher's Stone itself. One offers eternal life. The other offers human connection. Only one truly saves. Ron's gift also reflects his own character. For all his jokes, for all his insecurities about being overshadowed by his brothers, Ron is generous in the ways that matter. He does not have the wealth of Malfoy nor the prestige of Percy, but what he has, he gives. The frog is not a diamond, but it is all the more meaningful for its simplicity. In that act, Ron affirms that friendship is built not on the value of the gift, but on the thought behind it. For Harry, this was a revelation. The Dursleys had taught him to equate worth with possessions. The Weasleys, through Ron, taught him to equate worth with love. In many ways, this moment foreshadows the essence of the series. Again and again, Rowling returns to the theme that small choices define us more than grand destinies. Voldemort seeks power through monumental acts, murder, domination, Horcruxes. Harry finds strength in choosing kindness. Ron's frog, trivial in the eyes of outsiders, is monumental in Harry's story. It is the first step on a path that will culminate years later in Harry willingly walking into the Forbidden Forest armed not with a wand, but with the memory of love given freely. Harry himself seems to understand, though perhaps not consciously, the importance of this. When he smiles at Ron and accepts the frog, it is with gratitude deeper than words. For someone who had been starved of affection, every sweet shared, every game played, every laugh exchanged was a treasure. The frog was a crystallization of those moments. It was proof that he had entered a world where he was not merely tolerated but valued. The contrast is striking when we recall how gifts functioned in his old life. Dudley once received 36 presents on his birthday and threw a tantrum because it was fewer than the year before. Harry, meanwhile, received cast-offs the Dursleys gave to display their power and to spoil Dudley into arrogance. Ron gave to affirm friendship. The difference lies not in the size of the gift, but in the spirit behind it. Harry, who had lived on the crumbs of cruelty, understood that spirit more than anyone else. A chocolate frog, therefore, was not a sweet, it was a declaration. It is also worth remembering that Harry's first year at Hogwarts was filled with trials, from trolls in the dungeon to detentions in the Forbidden Forest, from facing Snape's suspicion to unravelling the mystery of Nicholas Flamel. He was thrust into danger again and again. At the end of such a year, the frog served as a moment of peace. It was Ron's way of telling him, "We survived, and now here is something to make it sweeter." In a story saturated with high stakes, this low-stakes gesture carried the weight of healing. The chocolate frog marks a boundary between two lives, the life Harry endured at Privet Drive and the life he began at Hogwarts. In the cupboard, gifts were weapons of humiliation. In the castle, gifts were tokens of love. The frog is a symbol of that transformation. It is why Harry, years later, would always find himself treasuring such tokens, Mrs. Weasley's sweaters, Hagrid's photo album, even Dobby's socks. They were not grand, but they were given with sincerity, and that was worth more than all the treasures hidden in vaults. Through Ron's chocolate frog, Rowling teaches her readers something profound, that love is found not in monuments, but in gestures, that the smallest kindness can heal the deepest wound, that a child who has been denied affection does not need riches, but recognition, and that in the end what saves us is not magic powerful enough to split a soul, but magic gentle enough to share a sweet. Number 21, Keeper of Keys and Grounds. Of all the characters Harry meets in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, none makes as powerful and unforgettable an entrance as Rubeus Hagrid. He appears on that stormy night, towering over the Dursleys' shack, bursting through the door with his massive frame and booming presence. When he introduces himself as the Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts, the words seem, at first glance, nothing more than a simple title. It is easy to assume that Hagrid is merely a caretaker, the man responsible for opening gates and looking after the castle's surroundings. Yet on closer reading, this title carries a far deeper weight, one that foreshadows his true role in Harry's life. Hagrid is not only a man who guards doors and locks, he is the one who holds the symbolic keys to Harry's destiny, unlocking a world hidden from him for 11 long years. The word keys in his title might seem mundane, but within the context of the story, it resonates with immense symbolism. Hagrid is the first person to physically place a key into Harry's hand when he takes him to Gringotts to open the small vault left in trust by his parents. At that moment, the metaphor of unlocking begins to take tangible form. Harry enters the Wizarding Bank, follows Hagrid to the Goblin counters, and watches as the heavy doors are opened by enchanted keys and goblin magic. More than just coins and inheritance lie within those stone walls. The vault represents a legacy, a bridge to the past. His parents left him. Hagrid, the Keeper of Keys, is the one who grants Harry this access. It is through him that Harry steps both literally and figuratively into a new world that was always waiting for him. Hagrid's role as keybearer stretches beyond the simple mechanics of locks and doors. In myth and legend, a Keeper of Keys often symbolizes a threshold guardian, a figure who stands at the border between two realms and decides who may pass. In Harry's case, that threshold is the border between the dull, oppressive life in the cupboard under the stairs and the vibrant, dangerous, magical existence awaiting him. When Hagrid utters those unforgettable words, "You're a wizard, Harry," he is, in effect, unlocking Harry's identity. That moment transforms the boy from an unloved orphan into someone who belongs to an extraordinary lineage. Hagrid's words themselves function as keys, breaking the locks that bound Harry to the lies of the Dursleys. It is telling that Hagrid appears not only as a bearer of news, but as a protector in the moment of Harry's awakening. Vernon Dursley's resistance, his angry shouts, and Petunia's spiteful revelations are silenced by Hagrid's towering presence. He literally defends Harry against their cruelty, even going so far as to bend Vernon's gun into a knot. In this way, the Keeper of Keys does more than open doors. He ensures that those doors stay open by shielding Harry from forces that would drag him back into darkness. Hagrid is the guardian who keeps the fragile flame of truth alive during its first flicker. Another powerful instance of Hagrid's role as key holder occurs during Harry's first entry into Diagon Alley. Without Hagrid, the brick wall behind the leaky cauldron would remain a mystery to Harry. It is Hagrid who taps the bricks with his pink umbrella, and it is Hagrid who reveals the bustling, enchanting street of shops hidden from ordinary eyes. Rowling writes, the wall flickered and melted away into a great archway that led into Diagon Alley. This act of opening a secret passage is more than an errand for school supplies, it is the literal unveiling of magic. The door opens, and the boy who had known nothing but neglect is suddenly engulfed in a community of wizards. The Keeper of Keys reveals not just a street, but an entire civilization. Hagrid is also the one who takes Harry to Gringotts Vault 713, a vault hidden deep beneath the bank and guarded by spells and dragons. The object they retrieve, the Philosopher's Stone, is itself a symbol of hidden knowledge and ultimate transformation. Though Harry does not yet understand the stone's importance, Hagrid once again plays the role of the keybearer, holding access to mysteries that far exceed Harry's comprehension. The parallel is striking. Just as Hagrid grants Harry access to his modest inheritance, he also participates in safeguarding the most coveted magical treasure in Britain. The act of carrying the small package reinforces Hagrid's symbolic place as the one who opens and guards the boundaries of magical power. Throughout Harry's first year, the theme of Hagrid as keybearer reappears in subtler forms. When the trio seeks answers about the stone, Hagrid inadvertently provides clues. His love for dangerous creatures, his tendency to speak more than he should, and his role as guardian of the grounds make him both a helper and an obstacle. In this way, he resembles the mythic gatekeepers who test heroes before allowing them to move forward. Harry, Ron, and Hermione must interpret his words carefully, just as one would decode a riddle to unlock a door. The dragon egg incident with Norbert exemplifies this perfectly. Hagrid's secret, though reckless, becomes another form of hidden key, opening a path for the children toward their ultimate confrontation with Voldemort. It is no accident that Hagrid accompanies Harry at other pivotal thresholds. On the first journey to Hogwarts, it is Hagrid, who brings the children to King's Cross and instructs them to seek platform 9 3/4. Though he does not walk them through the barrier himself, he provides the crucial knowledge, acting as a guide once more. The hidden entrance, invisible to Muggle eyes, is another lock that requires a special kind of key: belief, courage, and trust. Harry succeeds in passing through because Hagrid has already instilled in him the confidence that magic is real, that he belongs in this strange, hidden place. In the broader sense, Hagrid's title as Keeper of Keys extends beyond his duties to the school and into his relationship with Harry's heart. The emotional key he provides is acceptance. When Harry hears the truth about his parents from Hagrid, he receives not just information, but a sense of belonging that had been denied him his entire life. Hagrid tells him about James and Lily with tenderness and sorrow, ensuring that Harry knows his parents loved him. This revelation unlocks a different kind of door, the locked chamber of Harry's grief and yearning. It allows him to form an emotional connection with the past and with those who protected him. The narrative also presents Hagrid as a figure who, despite his enormous size and intimidating presence, carries the gentlest of keys. His compassion for creatures others deem monstrous reflects his role as someone who can unlock understanding and empathy. From Fang the boarhound to Fluffy the three-headed dog, Hagrid introduces Harry to beings that most wizards fear. These creatures, like Harry himself, exist on the margins, misunderstood and misjudged. In showing Harry these beasts, Hagrid is again unlocking doors, this time into perspectives of tolerance and kindness that will shape Harry's choices later in life. Even in the climax of the story, when Harry descends into the chambers to protect the stone, echoes of Hagrid's key-bearing role can be felt. The first obstacle they encounter is Fluffy, the three-headed dog, Hagrid's own guardian creature. Knowledge of how to bypass Fluffy by playing music is knowledge the children obtain through Hagrid's loose tongue. He becomes, indirectly, the one who gives them the key to move forward. In this sense, his role resonates all the way into the resolution of the tale. Though he does not accompany Harry in the final confrontation, his presence is embedded in the path Harry walks. Rowling's choice of words in naming Hagrid's position cannot be accidental. To keep keys is not merely to manage doors, but to safeguard access to knowledge, safety, and identity. Hagrid stands as the liminal figure, the one who moves between the ordinary and the extraordinary, and who ushers others across that boundary. He is both the literal gatekeeper of Hogwarts and the symbolic key to Harry's transformation. Without Hagrid, Harry would have remained locked in a cupboard, locked in ignorance, and locked in a life devoid of wonder. It is also worth noting that Harry's trust in Hagrid is absolute, forged in these early acts of unlocking. Even when Hagrid makes mistakes or reveals flaws, Harry never doubts his loyalty. This trust, established from the very first introduction, becomes one of the unbreakable bonds of the series. It is as though Hagrid not only gave Harry keys to Hogwarts, but also received in return a permanent key to Harry's heart. Their bond is unshakable because it was formed at the threshold of Harry's new life. Looking back on the Philosopher's Stone, the detail of Hagrid's title, Keeper of Keys and Grounds, reads differently once the larger story is known. What seemed a formal duty was, in truth, a narrative seed planted with care. Hagrid is the gatekeeper, the threshold guardian, the man who opens more than doors. He opens futures, reveals truths, and protects the fragile beginnings of hope. For readers who glossed over the words on first encounter, a return reveals their significance. The keys in his care were never just iron tools for locks, they were the means by which Harry's true life could begin. Thus the first book subtly sets Hagrid apart as more than a friendly giant or a bumbling companion. He is the very first link between Harry and the magical world, the one who ensures that the boy steps through every necessary doorway. Each act of key-bearing, from the Gringotts vault to the Diagon Alley bricks, underscores his importance. The simplicity of his title hides a profound truth. The boy who lived could not have become who he was without the Keeper of Keys. The lock was waiting, the door was sealed, but it was Hagrid's hand that turned the key and let the light in. Number 22, the first lesson with Snape. In that first potions lesson of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the stage is set with a single glance. Harry enters the dungeon classroom still carrying the naive excitement of a boy beginning his magical education, and then comes the cold shadow of Severus Snape. The words that follow do not merely announce the start of a subject, they echo with foreboding weight. Snape addresses the class, and in the silence of the dungeon he says, "I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop a death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." To most readers on their first journey through the story, this is simply a hostile introduction to an unfriendly professor. Yet upon reflection, this statement is more than bluster. It is prophecy. The same man who boasts of stopping death becomes the very figure who spends his life resisting it, caught in its grip, and finally yielding to it so that others may live. The sharpness of Snape's words is unforgettable because of the deliberate contrast between promise and cruelty. He promises knowledge deeper than any other teacher might offer. Fame, glory, and even defiance of death, these are not minor skills, but the very essence of human ambition and fear. At the same time, Snape offers these not as gifts, but as a challenge, one laced with disdain. He calls his students dunderheads, making it clear that he expects failure from them all. Harry, hearing this, feels only resentment. He does not yet know that the bitterness in Snape's voice masks wounds far older than Harry himself. But in that single speech, Rowling foreshadows the paradox of Snape's role. He is the man who insults and torments, and yet he is also the man whose mastery of death and sacrifice will define the survival of the boy he despises. Consider the precision of the phrase, "stop a death." At 11 years old, Harry cannot possibly understand the weight of those words. Even the reader, swept into the world of spells and charms, interprets this as a boast about potions, perhaps an elixir of immortality or some miraculous antidote. Yet when the series unfolds, we realize that Snape himself becomes the stopper, the barrier placed between Harry and the grasp of death. Again and again, Snape intervenes at critical moments, saving Harry's life with counter-curses, protective actions, and quiet vigilance. When Quirrell attempts to knock Harry from his broom during his first Quidditch match, it is Snape who mutters a counter-curse to save him. Later, during the Triwizard Tournament, Snape provides Dumbledore with Veritaserum and assists in the investigation that keeps Harry alive. The man who first declared he could stop a death proves his claim, not through potions in a cauldron, but through the bitter endurance of his own life's mission. The fact that Rowling placed this foreshadowing in Snape's very first lesson is no coincidence. She constructs his character from the beginning as a man bound to death. His entire life revolves around the death of Lily Potter, the woman he loved, whose murder by Voldemort defines every choice he makes thereafter. When he speaks of stopping death, it is not merely theoretical. His existence is already chained to the memory of the one death he could not prevent. That failure becomes the reason he spends the rest of his life guarding her son. The irony is cruel. Snape speaks proudly of defeating death, yet his greatest torment is that he failed to do so once and that failure will never release him. This connection becomes even more powerful when we compare Snape's words with those of Voldemort. The Dark Lord is obsessed with conquering death at any cost, splitting his soul, seeking immortality, and hunting the Philosopher's Stone. His pursuit of the stone is motivated by fear and greed. Snape, by contrast, embodies a different relationship to mortality. He does not attempt to evade it, but accepts that his own life must eventually be sacrificed. He stops death not by prolonging his own existence, but by intervening for others. In this way, his first lesson stands as a mirror to Voldemort's obsession. Both men speak of death. One tries to master it for selfishness, the other accepts it for love. When Harry later learns the truth in the Deathly Hallows, he finally sees that Snape's entire existence has been a process of stopping death for him. Dumbledore reveals that Snape has kept him alive all these years. Every protective action, every hidden intervention, fulfills the prophecy of those first words. The cruel professor who once seemed eager to humiliate him was in fact the shield between him and Voldemort. That early disdain is still real, but it coexists with a deeper mission. It is this duality, hatred and love, cruelty and sacrifice, that makes Snape's character one of the most compelling in the entire saga. One of the subtler touches in that opening lesson is the emphasis on glory and fame. Bottle fame, brew glory, Snape says, and Harry is sitting in front of him, the boy who already has both, without having done anything to earn it. Snape resents this fact more than anything else. The son of James Potter, Harry represents everything Snape lost, including Lily's love. Fame and glory surround Harry as naturally as breathing, while Snape, the master of hidden knowledge, receives none. His bitter envy colours every word he directs at Harry. But beneath this hostility lies the deeper irony. Harry's fame depends entirely on Snape's hidden labour. Without Snape's sacrifices, the boy who lived would never have survived. In this way, the lesson's emphasis on fame foreshadows Snape's future as the unsung hero, the man who receives none of the glory he enables. Another layer of meaning lies in the setting itself. The potions dungeon is cold, dark and underground, described by Rowling as a place filled with jars of preserved creatures, shadows, and an air of danger. This is not a welcoming classroom, it is a symbolic descent into secrecy and death. Snape's words echo in that environment like a ritual. For a boy who has just left the warmth of Gryffindor Tower, this is a plunge into another world. Snape is not only teaching potions, he is inducting his students into the mysteries of mortality. Rowling's use of setting underscores that his lessons are not about school exercises but about life and death themselves. Even the questions Snape directs at Harry during that first lesson contribute to this foreshadowing. He asks about bezoars, wolfbane, and the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane. Harry, of course, cannot answer, and Snape humiliates him for his ignorance. But each of these ingredients foreshadows events in the story. A bezoar later saves Ron's life when he drinks poisoned mead in The Half-Blood Prince. Wolfsbane becomes essential in controlling Remus Lupin's condition in The Prisoner of Azkaban. These are not random questions, they are glimpses into Harry's future, planted in his very first class by the man who will constantly appear at the crossroads of life and death. When Dumbledore entrusts Harry's protection to Snape, it is precisely because of this capacity to stand between life and death. Dumbledore knows Snape's vow, sworn to protect Lily's son, is unbreakable, but he also knows Snape's knowledge of the dark arts, of curses and antidotes, makes him uniquely suited to the task. Snape's identity as a potions master is more than academic, it is the embodiment of survival. Every antidote, every potion, every defense he crafts is part of the long process of stoppering death around Harry. This makes the words of that first lesson resonate more deeply with each book that follows. The relationship between Harry and Snape is poisoned from the start, and yet it is in that poisoned relationship that the series' deepest truth resides. Snape does not like Harry, and Harry certainly does not like Snape. Their enmity is genuine. Yet despite this, Snape fulfills the role of protector. This paradox is the heart of the tragedy. A man who despises the boy must also be the one to preserve him. In literature, such contradictions create the richest characters, and Rowling builds this paradox from the very first classroom scene. The line, "Stop a death," reads at first like arrogance, but with hindsight it becomes the quiet mission statement of a life lived in sacrifice. Snape's final moments in the Deathly Hallows echo back to this beginning. As he lies dying in the Shrieking Shack, his last act is to pass his memories to Harry. He does not speak of glory or fame, only of truth. Through those memories, Harry sees the entirety of Snape's double life, the vow, the suffering, the endless service. The boy who once felt humiliated in that first lesson now understands that every cruel word was hiding a devotion stronger than friendship. In those memories, Harry finally comprehends what it means to stop a death, not in a potion bottle, but in the heart of a man who lived for another's child. The artistry of Rowling's writing is in how she hides these revelations in plain sight. The first-time reader encounters an unpleasant teacher and moves on, focusing on Quidditch matches and adventures. The seasoned reader, returning to the dungeon, hears the weight of prophecy in Snape's words. What seemed arrogance becomes lament, what seemed cruelty becomes foreshadowing. The potions lesson is not just a moment of school drama, it is the unveiling of a theme that will carry the series to its conclusion: death, and the ways in which love and sacrifice can resist it. The true genius of this detail is that it can be missed entirely by a casual reader, and yet when the story is finished, it feels inevitable. Snape was always going to be the one tied to death. He was always going to be the one whose life revolved around the act of stopping it for others. His first lesson to Harry was never about cauldrons and ingredients. It was about mortality, loss, and the cost of love. And when Snape finally does stop a death, it is not through the promise of a potion, but through the surrender of his life. Number 23, Dumbledore's Gift, the Invisibility Cloak. When Harry Potter opens the mysterious package on Christmas morning, in his first year at Hogwarts, the gift inside seems at first like nothing more than an exciting toy for a boy who has lived most of his life without presents. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. The note, unsigned, but clearly from Albus Dumbledore, accompanies the shimmering fabric that slips through Harry's fingers like liquid silver. At that moment in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, readers perceive the cloak as a useful magical trinket, a device that allows Harry to sneak through the castle's corridors. Yet beneath the excitement of secret midnight wanderings, the cloak is the earliest appearance of one of the most important magical artifacts in the entire saga, the Cloak of Invisibility, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows. What makes this detail so striking is the way J.K. Rowling plants it without explanation, without fanfare, and without any immediate sense of its significance. Harry, Ron, and Hermione treat it as they would any magical item, no different from chocolate frogs or spellbooks. Even readers at the time of first publication in 1997 had no way of knowing that they were holding, alongside Harry, an artifact that tied him to an ancient legend of 3 brothers and death itself. The cloak becomes a means to an end, used to sneak into the restricted section of the library. Overhear conversations about Nicholas Flamel, and to wander into adventures. Its true nature as a relic older than Hogwarts, older than Dumbledore, remains completely hidden until the final book, when the tale of the Deathly Hallows is revealed. The way the cloak is described in the first book contains hints that attentive readers might later recall. Rowling writes, "He threw the cloak around his shoulders, and lo and behold, he was invisible." The phrasing is almost casual, as though she is downplaying what is, in reality, an extraordinary object. Later, when Ron suggests that most cloaks of invisibility wear out or fade, Harry's cloak never does. This subtle contrast plants a seed of uniqueness, though at the time it feels like an offhand remark. In truth, the Hallows cloak is the only perfect one of its kind, impervious to age and immune to the spells that normally weaken other invisibility fabrics. Dumbledore, who is fascinated by the Hallows, must have known immediately what kind of gift he was giving. The decision to hand over such a powerful object to an 11-year-old boy was not casual. Dumbledore's words in the note, "Use it well," sound like encouragement, but also read as a quiet test. Dumbledore is already watching Harry, weighing his character, and placing before him an object that connects him to his family, his destiny, and a myth that stretches back centuries. It is also one of the few heirlooms Harry inherits directly from his parents. James Potter once used the cloak in school, sneaking through the same hallways his son now explores, and his ownership was no accident. The Peverell line through which the cloak descended is Harry's ancestral family. This gift is not only magical but blood-bound, returning to the rightful heir at the moment when his story at Hogwarts begins. The significance becomes even more powerful when we realize that Dumbledore himself coveted the Hallows. He once sought the Elder Wand and dreamed of mastering all three to become Master of Death. His youthful ambition with Gellert Grindelwald ended in tragedy, leaving him wary of such temptations. To give Harry the cloak was, therefore, an act filled with restraint and meaning. Instead of keeping the Hallow for himself, Dumbledore chose to pass it on, allowing Harry to grow with it, unaware of its true identity, until the time was right. It was an sign of trust, but also of the professor's complex plan that stretched across years, in which every object and every lesson played a part. The cloak's use in Philosopher's Stone might seem like mere convenience for storytelling, but every instance foreshadows the future. When Harry uses it to reach the Mirror of Erised, he encounters Dumbledore waiting for him, a reminder that the headmaster always knows more than he reveals. The cloak here allows Harry to confront his deepest longing, to see his family, while being hidden from the world. Later, when he uses it to enter the restricted section, it demonstrates how curiosity and secrecy will always mark his journey. Finally, during the climactic confrontation with Quirrell, the cloak is absent, a detail that shows Harry's growth. Protection and power can help, but in the end, he must face danger with courage, not concealment. Rowling's brilliance lies in how the cloak is woven seamlessly into the boyhood adventures without raising suspicion. Readers cheer as Harry and his friends sneak through the castle, finding mischief and uncovering secrets. Yet when the seventh book reveals the tale of the three brothers and the reality of the Deathly Hallows, the memory of that Christmas morning takes on a new, almost chilling weight. Suddenly, it is not simply a gift but a legacy. Harry had in his possession from the very start the key to surviving death itself. The invisibility cloak was no schoolboy's gadget. It was an ancient shield against mortality, a link to Ignotus Peverell, and proof that Harry's journey was always entwined with the Hallows legend. Specific examples from later books confirm how special the cloak is. In Deathly Hallows, Xenophilius Lovegood explains, "The third brother went forth with death, and he greeted him as an old friend." This is the fate of the one who owned the cloak, who lived a full life and then accepted death when his time came. Harry, descended from that brother, inherits not only the cloak, but also the philosophy it represents, acceptance rather than conquest. In contrast, Voldemort seeks the Elder Wand desiring power, while Dumbledore once craved knowledge and control. Harry alone inherits the relic that embodies humility and peace, the true mark of the Master of Death. Even within the first book, clues to this philosophy are visible in the way Harry uses the cloak. He does not exploit it to harm others or to seek selfish gain. Instead, he uses it to explore, to understand, to learn the truth about Flamel, and ultimately to protect what is right. These small decisions foreshadow his later role as the one who chooses compassion over domination. Dumbledore's gift was not just protection, but a mirror of Harry's nature, aligning him unconsciously with the values of the third brother who accepted death without fear. The invisibility cloak also represents the theme of legacy and memory, vital threads throughout the Harry Potter series. In the restricted section scene, the cloak allows Harry to continue his father's tradition, sneaking among the shelves, just as James Potter once did. The laughter of the marauders echoes in these hallways, and the cloak becomes a silent bridge between generations. For a boy who knows almost nothing about his parents, wrapping the cloak around himself is a way of stepping into his father's life, sharing in something tangible and magical that binds them. It is a connection no photograph or letter could replace. A striking moment comes when Harry drops the cloak at the base of the Mirror of Erised and forgets it in his awe of the reflections. He is willing to expose himself, invisible no longer, in pursuit of family. This reveals his deepest desire, belonging, not secrecy. Even with the greatest concealment in the wizarding world, Harry chooses instead to stand before an illusion of his parents. The cloak, therefore, contrasts with his longing. It hides him from others, but what he truly seeks is to be seen, to be recognized as a son and as part of a family. That tension between concealment and revelation runs throughout the series. The knowledge that this cloak is one of the Deathly Hallows redefines Dumbledore's choice in giving it. It shows the deliberate way he positioned Harry to inherit not only a magical tool, but a philosophy. By the time Harry learns the truth, he has grown into the kind of wizard who values humility, sacrifice, and love, qualities that make him the rightful master of the Hallows. But the seed of that mastery was planted in Philosopher's Stone, in the quiet moment when an orphaned boy unwrapped a shimmering piece of fabric on Christmas morning. The artistry lies in the layering of meaning. What once read as adventure becomes prophecy. What once felt like mischief becomes destiny. The cloak's presence in the first book is a reminder that nothing in Rowling's world is accidental. The simplest gifts hold the deepest truths, and the smallest details may, years later, become the foundation of the story's grandest revelations. What Harry received was not only a present from his headmaster, but an inheritance from his ancestors, a shield against death, and a silent promise that his journey was always about more than magic. It was about choice, about the acceptance of mortality, and about the power of legacy. By hiding the significance of the cloak until the end, Rowling ensures that rereading the first book feels transformed. The detail once overlooked now resonates with immense gravity. Readers realize that they, like Harry, were protected by ignorance until the time was right to understand. The invisibility cloak was not just a clever plot device, but the very thread that stitched together the opening of the saga with its conclusion, making the story feel inevitable, fated, and profound. Number 24, The First Meeting with a Centaur. Under the moonlit canopy of the Forbidden Forest, Harry's first year at Hogwarts takes a darker, more haunting turn. The shadows of the ancient trees seem alive, whispering secrets older than the school itself. It is here, amidst the chill of midnight and the hushed steps of danger, that Harry encounters Firenze, the centaur who delivers a line so deceptively simple that many readers pass over it without pausing. "Mars is bright tonight," he says, his eyes turned toward the heavens. For a young boy still new to the magical world, it sounds like nothing more than an odd remark about the stars. But in truth, it is one of the earliest and most profound pieces of foreshadowing in the entire series. It is the language of prophecy spoken through a celestial metaphor, an omen hidden in plain sight. The importance of that single phrase rests in centuries of symbolism. Mars, the red planet, has long been associated with bloodshed, with war, and with violent upheaval. Firenze's observation carries more weight than any lesson Harry has heard in Professor Sinistra's astronomy tower. For Harry, Ron, and Hermione, Mars is bright tonight could have been dismissed as cryptic nonsense, the musings of a half-man, half-horse creature in the forest. But J.K. Rowling places it deliberately, shaping a moment that ripples far beyond Harry's first year. It is not only about the Philosopher's Stone and the figure-hunting unicorns in the darkness, it is about the entire saga of conflict to come. The struggle between good and evil that will consume the wizarding world. What makes this moment so effective is its context. Harry is in the forest as punishment, already frightened by the eerie stillness and the sight of a dying unicorn. His world is shifting from the innocence of Quidditch and classes into something far more serious and sinister. When Firenze appears, offering both guidance and warning, he represents a bridge between myth and reality. His words about Mars are not idle stargazing, but a reminder that the universe itself reflects the turmoil below. To those who know the law of divination, it is as if the cosmos is crying out that battle is coming. For a reader who only glances at the line, it may pass unnoticed. But upon reflection, it is a prophecy wrapped in the disguise of casual astronomy. The idea that the stars reveal destiny is central to centaur culture. Rowling shows us in later books that centaurs hold divination through the heavens as sacred knowledge. Firenze's declaration is part of that worldview. To him, Mars, shining brightly, is not chance, but certainty, a sign of the bloodshed that will stain the wizarding world. This is what makes his role so unusual. He chooses to share with Harry a piece of this wisdom, though other centaurs scorn the act of interfering in human affairs. That single line encapsulates both Firenze's defiance of his kind and his compassion for Harry. By speaking of Mars, he reveals more than the other centaurs are willing to admit, hinting that fate has chosen the boy before destiny has even revealed itself. Seen from the wider perspective of the series, this line foreshadows the wars that define Harry's life. Voldemort's rise is not merely a personal struggle between a dark wizard and a schoolboy. It is a conflict that engulfs families, friendships, and the entire structure of the magical society. Mars is bright tonight is, in essence, a statement that the world stands on the brink of bloodshed. The readers may not realize it in the Philosopher's Stone, but by the time they reach the Order of the Phoenix and the Deathly Hallows, the words of Firenze resonate with chilling accuracy. The deaths of Cedric Diggory, Sirius Black, Albus Dumbledore, and countless others are all foreshadowed in that single celestial warning. It is worth remembering that Harry hears this omen at the very moment he encounters Voldemort for the first time since infancy. The shadowy figure drinking unicorn blood is none other than the Dark Lord, clinging to life in the most unnatural of ways. The brightness of Mars is not only symbolic of the wars yet to come, but also a mirror of Voldemort's hunger for power and destruction. The forest scene sets the tone for everything that follows. Firenze's remark is not only about the cosmic alignment, but about the immediate danger. Harry, unknowingly, is already stepping into the war that Mars has announced. From that night onward, he is no longer an innocent child discovering magic. He is the chosen one, bound to a prophecy of blood and fire. The brilliance of Rowling's storytelling lies in how she weaves these moments of prophecy into ordinary scenes. To a child reader, Firenze's words may sound mysterious but unimportant. To an adult reader, or to someone revisiting the series, they take on an entirely new weight. This is the genius of foreshadowing, planting seeds that grow over years, unnoticed at first, until they bloom with undeniable significance. Mars is bright tonight is one of those seeds. It seems so small in the shadow of unicorns and centaurs, but it holds within it the entire storm of Voldemort's war. What also makes the line significant is how it contrasts with the innocence of the early chapters. At this stage in the story, Harry is still marveling at wizard suites, enchanted ceilings, and his first broomstick ride. The forest scene and Firenze's prophecy break through that wonder with a reminder of mortality and violence. A unicorn, the purest of creatures, lies dead with its silver blood glistening in the moonlight. A centaur, solemn and ancient, speaks of Mars and war, and a child, barely 11 years old, stands at the heart of it. Rowling shifts the tone deliberately, using Firenze's remark to draw the curtain on childhood fantasies and open the stage to the realities of destiny and sacrifice.